All right.
All right.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Bleav in Hubble Champions podcast, the return of your Shuli Shukri right here alongside two guests today, two notable names in hockey media, Julian McKenzie of The Athletic, and the other one being the lovely Erica Ayala. Now that I know that she's also from New York, New Yorkeño, hey,
Let's go.
But that's what's up, though. Like, excited to have you both on. It's been a phenomenal podcast so far. Now, part 2, I'm gonna have a little fun with this because we have a Canadian here in Julian, and you're from Toronto originally, right?
Montreal.
You're a Habs fan, I'm guessing, right?
I used to be. Yeah, when I started writing about hockey and stuff, maybe 5-6 years ago, that's when I realized, okay, actually, it's not even when I started writing about hockey. I stopped being a Habs fan the day PK Subban got traded to Nashville. And the very next day, I moved from Montreal to Syracuse because I was doing a year of grad school at Syracuse University. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be in the States for a year. I'm going to not really care about hockey that much. So this is a good way to kind of start to distance myself from the fandom. And then I interned for an AHL team while I was there. So that just what I tried to get away from hockey, I just couldn't. And then when I moved back to Montreal, I actually ended up writing for Habs Eyes on the Prize, which is an SB Nation site. But at that same time, I was like, you know what, if I want to get into hockey journalism and sports media as a whole, this was a good way for me to start. But I really didn't want my fandom or any fandom to get in the way of that sort of stuff. So there was a time, I was a Montreal Canadiens fan, but that hasn't been the case for at least 6 years.
Oh, that's impressive. I mean, to be able to separate from your fanhood to your professionalism life, and I get questions like that all the time. More on that in a little bit because I actually want to turn the table over to.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not above Boston slander in any sense of the word. It's just my fandom has to be distanced.
See,
wow.
I wasn't trying to stir up smoke, but if you're willing to stir up smoke, I have no problem.
Do you have to stir up?
You can perpetually enjoy picking top 5 every year for the next 5 years, while the Bruins can perpetually continue to kick your back.
You're not going to hurt me by mentioning how the Canadiens are going to have to pick top 5. There's nothing you could do with that. It's you who puts all the emotion and all that into your teams, so to speak. you have to live with the fact that Boston has an NHL team that supposedly had the greatest regular season of all time, only to lose in the first round. You have to live with the fact that you don't know if you're going to have your number 1 center coming back, and you have to figure out what you're going to do with all these guys leaving your team. You're going to have to live with the fact that the Boston Bruins, the only thing that stopped them last season was due diligence with the Mitchell Miller thing. That's on you as far as I'm concerned. Those things don't hurt me.
Wow, but fandom to the side.
You came out with Muhammad Ali punches.
Fandom to the side, but hateration and holleration will sometimes win the battle. Yeah.
But you know what? You're not wrong on the Mitchell Miller thing, which I really do believe that it got the attention of the NHL because some people from the NHL side of things reached out to me late last year, during the season, and were like, hey, we're interested in talking to you. I was like, pardon? And it was like, why me? And what's the reason? Well, your content on Mitchell Miller went super viral and it caught our attention. I'm like, I would hope it would because I didn't hold back. So for those that are wondering what I'm talking about, just go on my Twitter, type in Mitchell Miller. I did a lot of content on that back then, and I still stand by every single word that I said back then. But good job on the flaming, Julian. I appreciate the great banter. I'm gonna have to live with that scar for the rest of my life. And I'm sure millions of Bruin fans, even in Canada, are going to have to be perpetually reminded by the Canadian teams in every Canadian market. Oh, by the way, congrats on a great regular season, and congrats on being a great choke job audience as well. I mean, we thought the Leafs were bad enough. But no. The Bruins had a whole other ingredient called chokerade. Just go a 3-1 and, everything will go well. Erica,
you see the hate just a little bit. See this man's going through?
Yeah,
see what he's going through? That's
Yeah,
pain.
that's a lot. I mean,
lot of pain.
I'm just trying to understand how y'all didn't catch the drift when Seattle came through and gave you your first regulation loss at TD Garden. I'm just
Yeah, no, you're right.
so
You could always move, Shukri.
I mean, no, don't tempt me with a good time. Don't tempt me, because I've thought about it. I've actually have thought about it, but I'm like, I just got this gig with the hockey news. I'm not gonna move.
Congratulations.
I mean,
that's dope.
like, thank you. I'm not gonna. This could actually. This is the big window of opportunity. Like to make it in this industry. But with that being said, going back to Erica, minus the shade from the shade room, in Calgary. Can we touch on the Seattle Kraken for just a moment, because what a second year that they had. I mean, I know a lot of people were thinking, well, were the Kraken going to have the same success in year one that the Las Vegas Golden Knights? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me put some respect on their name. The Stanley Cup champion Las Vegas Golden Knights would have in year one, but they didn't. But in year two, they eliminated the defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche in round one. Like,
did that? Sure did.
Yeah, they sure did. But tell us about like just how much this season has impacted hockey in the Northwest, and even just the overall perception of how the NHL is not only alive but is thriving in the Pacific Northwest as well.
Well, I think first of all, you got to remember that the city of Seattle has already had a Stanley Cup champion.
1917.
And that's it. The Seattle Metropolitans, which I love as a New York Metropolitan fan. Now I get to cover, that's yes. Listen, I've already heard it all. You ain't gonna hurt me. That's all right. I live with it. I wear it as a badge of honor. Thank you very much. Anyway, back to hockey. So there's a history. There's a long history of hockey at multiple levels, including women's hockey history in the Pacific Northwest and in Seattle in particular. It's really a hub for a lot of youth hockey that happens in the Pacific Northwest, including Alaska, of course. So there's that. But the Seattle Kraken, and what really, because I was not covering men's hockey before I started as the first ever host of the Locked On Kraken podcast. And I actually got to do some writing for, at the time, NHL Seattle. They didn't even have a name yet, but I did some of the writing for their official brand name. And I think what I like is that there's been a lot of intentionality. So we talked a little bit about the hockey for everyone and women's hockey and some of the very blatant misses that the NHL in particular, and I would argue the larger hockey community, has when it comes to really doing things that are incorporating and welcoming diverse pools. And I think the Seattle franchise really focused on that. They focused on the history. They focused on the hockey history in Seattle and have done an amazing job. I mean, Everett Fitzhugh is just one, you've got JT Brown also. They were able to draft their first ever Black player in Zach Wisdom this last draft class. So they're doing a lot of really great things. And I think also the broadcast team does a great job of leaning into people who are super devout hockey fans while also not alienating Seattle sports fans or Seattle and Pacific Northwest people who just want to have fun with the newest toy, right? And so I think that's been really great to watch as someone who knows hockey but is still learning the NHL culture of hockey, which are different things. Like, I've watched a lot of international men's and women's hockey at the junior level, at obviously the Olympic level. I was in Beijing covering the men's and women's tournaments, but to come into the NHL is different. It just is. And so that's been enjoyable to watch. As far as the team, we are a blue collar team. Last season, I was saying we're like teenagers where you tell them something once, they're nodding, shaking their head, they're excited to do it, and then they go out and they don't. And they just don't. And I'm not even trying to shade them. I mean, that's just what it is. You're still learning, right? And we made some moves at the trade deadline this particular season, or well, I guess both seasons, but trade deadline moves last year that led to free agent moves that we could make in leading up to season 2. And we had to do things that way. And you know, we were talking a little off air, like that's what Seattle is still doing. I think it's still a little bit conservative. I think I would like to see them use, we're good with cap space, but I think it's always that balance between how much money do we save for the future with Matty Beniers, Rookie of the Year, Calder winner? How much money do we save for? We still, as of the time of this recording, we don't have a deal with Vince Dunn. And so, you know, we'll see if he'll go through the full arbitration process. So, you know, there's some things where I think Seattle is trying to hedge how much they want to have for the future for some of these players that have already proven that they can be their stars in waiting. And we want them to do that with Seattle versus finding someone who's really going to be a good name. I would love to see us get a really strong defenseman. And so it's been a little bit of a balancing act, but I would say they arrived earlier than I thought. I had them finishing maybe 5 if we really pushed for it in the Pacific Division. And then I think really the Pacific Division overall was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, Calgary, there's a lot going on there. We don't have to, you know, there's a lot going on. I think we can say that. I think we started to see LA. I think they made some pretty good strides. I think they're still going to want to work on their consistency. Edmonton, I mean, is Edmonton, and you know they had a really strong surge to be in the top 3 in the division late, and you know then we started to see some of the things that they need to work on that we've kind of known probably that happened in the postseason. So I think for Seattle, what's great for us is that it was probably not what anyone expected, certainly not what I expected after the first season. Now the question is, how do we, if we arrived early, as I do believe we did, how do we now kind of capture that lightning in a bottle and make sure that we can, how much of that can we recreate so that we are considered a playoff team, and maybe we can be, you know, in that second, third round of the playoffs and work our way up to a Stanley Cup final. I think those are the questions. I don't know that we have all the answers yet. I think it's been it hasn't been completely like sleepy, but it's been, again, a conservative free agency period for the Seattle Kraken, but there is still a lot of excitement. I think that's going to carry over regardless of how the team starts, because we will host the Stanley Cup champions, the Vegas Golden Knights, for the Winter Classic at T-Mobile Park, who is getting ready to host the MLB All-Star Game. They just had the first ever HBCU Swingman Classic. So there's just a lot of energy right now in Seattle. So the timing is perfect for the Seattle Kraken. The performance that we had in season 2 is great and is going to continue even on a more cosmetic, if you want to argue superficial level. We're still going to have some energy, but we're close to the time where we're really going to have to prove that we're a true contender. I've given us about 3 to 5 years from inaugural season to really show what kind of a team we're going to be. And so we're going into season 3 coming up.
Julian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the fact that the Kraken had as good of a second season as they could have had, they've played a role in what I think could be true as of next year, in that the Pacific Division might be the most exciting division of all the divisions in the NHL, considering that they have the reigning Cup champion, the Golden Knights, the two of the best players in the world in Edmonton, a Los Angeles Kings team that could, on paper, could say they might have the best center depth in the league in Anze Kopitar, Philip Deneau, and Pierre-Luc Dubois now joining them. And the Flames, obviously, they're going to try to rebound after last year, but they have so many questions, and you're trying to see what could happen with them. And then you have the Seattle Kraken, who found a way to build a team that is balanced from the top down. Obviously, they still need more seasoning and they need more playoff experience. But one way they were able to get past a Colorado team that, yes, had all those injuries, but they found ways to get contributions up and down the lineup. And if they're able to continue that progress, then they're going to end up turning into that contending team. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that they have Shane Wright in the minor leagues right now, who is steps away from becoming a full-time NHLer. Not to mention the Coachella Valley Firebirds, a successful season in the AHL, even if it did result in a loss in the in the Calder Cup final. What an amazing run for those guys. I think if you're looking at the organization and you're looking at year 2, you have to be so proud of yourselves and the fact that you're able to get a team that's already in the conversation of being a perennial playoff team. And at the minor league level, you're seeing some success as well. and you're looking at some of your young players, notably your draft pick in Shane Wright, just turning himself into a player who's very close to being a solid NHL player. I would like to see them just kind of continue along that path and not necessarily put themselves in a position where they're throwing out a lot of assets to get some big name players. You kind of, I respect the patience. I know some people have thrown out the Kraken as a viable destination for Erik Karlsson. I don't know what a trade would look like if it got to that point, but I could totally see the Kraken just waiting and holding back and just seeing if they could progress a little bit more. But I think next season in the Pacific Division, we're in for a lot of intriguing storylines. Didn't even mention the Kraken and some of the other California teams as well. But sorry, not Kraken. I should have said the Canucks. I don't know why I confused the Kraken and Canucks. I just had a brain fart. It's Sunday.
We are not the same. We are not the
You're not the
same.
same. Two different teams.
I have a bone to pick with
fart.
them. I have a
All
bone
good.
to pick with them.
All good. All that to say, I think the Pacific Division is going to be really intriguing to follow, and the success of the Kraken plays a huge role in that.
Absolutely. You saw the season that they just had. I can't help but to think now, the eyeballs that are now going to be focused on the Kraken from a national perspective in terms of what are they going to do in year 3. And Erica, you touched on it poignantly. Like, what are they going to do in year 3? Like, what are they going to do in terms of the Vince Dunn situation? Are they going to be making any moves in free agency in terms of trades or any potential signings and so forth? Anything that David Hackstall may have in store for the upcoming season? I think those are just some of the like interesting questions that we won't really know or find out until training camp starts September. Yes. Hurry up and get here, please. And like I'm there personally. I'm there because it's going to be my first season covering the Bruins. Like from like just ever. Like in terms of from a writer's from a media perspective, I've never. This for me. This is a huge deal. So I'm genuinely excited.
Let's go.
You should be excited.
Like, let's go.
Like, actually, now that's a perfect segue to the next topic. Actually, what I want to touch on is how did you first get your first big break in sports media? Doesn't matter who starts first. I'll let you guys delegate amongst yourselves. Tell me your
Erica,
story.
You can start
because like I want to hear your story.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I did not know we were going to talk so much about women's hockey, but I have to go back to women's hockey. Nice. I have to go back to womenn's hockey and very specifically to Black women in hockey. So,
was it a Black Girl Foundation?
There's Black Girl Hockey Club. Yep, Black Girl Hockey. I will talk about them. I've also got my Women Pro Hockey Seattle earrings on that they gifted me last time I was in Seattle. But nice. So the story, right? So the story is that I'm one of 3 daughters. I have 2 sisters. They're twins. And so my sister Jessie got really into hockey during the Sochi Olympics. She like fell in love with Jonathan Quick on the men's side, and both the U.S. teams in 2014, for those maybe not familiar, had very dramatic and ultimately heartbreaking tournaments. But she was hooked. And this was, I talked about it when we talked about women's hockey. This was the 2014 Olympics. So the next season would have been 2015. And so, anyway, so soon after that, she heard of the NWHL starting, and they had a team in New York, in Brooklyn. And so I'm the sports fan in the family, definitely among the 3 daughters. So I was like, I'm gonna teach her how to be a sports fan. That's what we do. Like, we're gonna get the stuff. We're gonna, we gotta know this thing. We gotta know everything. Yeah. So went to a game, and one of the first players that I recognized was, because I knew a little something, watched D2 a time or two. So I was like, okay, I know the hockey. And I was like, yo, don't they have to like block shots in hockey? And I saw this player on the opposing team. The Riveters were the New York team. They were playing the Boston Pride. And I saw someone wind up. I was like, yo, the Riveters are supposed to block that shot. I was like, I don't think you could pay me enough to stand in front of that. And I was like, yo, who's number 10? Like, who's number 10 on the Boston Pride? And I was like, yo, wait a minute. Is she Black? I was like, oh snap, she's Black. Blake Bolden. Yep. That's who caught my eye. I was waiting for that. Blake Bolden. So flash forward, by the end of that first season, I'd just been taking my sister to games as fans, but I'm a curious person. I wanted to know who was writing, who's the Julian and Trick Greenleaf of the league. Like, I wanted to know these people. There weren't a lot of them. But so we got to communicating, and there was the semifinals were in two separate locations, but on the same exact dates at the same exact time. So one outlet was like, it's actually Luis Sanchez, or some people call him Luis. I say Luis because I'm a Latina, so he's Luis. But anyway, so he's a broadcaster for Boston College, and he was like, "Yo, Erica, like I know you've been following the league. We can't go to both semifinals. Can you cover the one in Connecticut?" I was like, "Bruh, like I'll go. I don't know how this works, but I'll go." He's like, nah, it's cool. Just like you're a sports fan, ask sports questions. I was like, bet. That's how I got my first credential. By the next year, I was on the broadcast. 2 years later, I got a chance to write for some blogs. Eventually, that led to just more opportunities. And now I'm going to be writing about hockey for CBS. So Black women, my sister, first and foremost, Blake Bolden with her nasty shot. And then, yes, through that, just the support and being seen by people like Black Girl Hockey Club has kept encouraging me. And so that's kind of my origin story. That's how I got started in journalism, period. So everything that has come after, WNBA, US soccer, all of that stuff comes from that origin story.
Okay. Growing up in Montreal, obviously hockey is a religion. So when you're going to like elementary school and you're finding stuff to talk about with your friends, hockey is very much going to come up a lot. So it's just a sport that I've always enjoyed watching and talking about for a great deal of my life. And when I was doing my undergrad and in Quebec, we have this thing called CEGEP, which is kind of in between high school and undergrad university. I was starting to do internships on the radio, working with the local TSN radio station, also working with the local sports department for one of the local TV stations in my hometown. And just from there, I was just trying to build myself up, just to put myself in a position where I could eventually try to start a career in journalism. And then I went away for a year doing grad school at Syracuse, and I got my internship with the Syracuse Crunch. And they had a first round playoff series against the Montreal Canadiens affiliate, which was in St. John's, Newfoundland at the time. And Habs Eyes on the Prize has a writer who's still there. His name is Scott Matla, who happens to live in upstate New York, I think in Rochester. I think they've since moved to Buffalo, but I think around that time they were still somewhere in another part of upstate New York. And I got to meet them for the first time during that playoff series, and we just connected and vibed. It was pretty cool. And I remember after that playoff ended, or at least partway through, I left after graduation from Syracuse and had some family back home. And I was like, I'll spend the summer with you guys. And as the new season was about to begin, I was trying to figure out what places I could freelance for. I was doing some research for the CBC for their local Montreal affiliate. I was just trying to find some other gigs as well. And Scott reached out to me over Twitter DM and said, "Hey, do you want to write for Habs Eyes on the Prize?" And this is a site I'd been reading for years. Guys like Andrew Berkshire, Marc Dumont, Laura Saba, a lot of great people who have come up from that website and have turned themselves. I mean, they've not just that they've started from that website, but a lot of them have found gigs in media. A lot of them have found opportunities on NHL teams. Eric Parnas, who would do some analytics stuff with the website, he's since gone on to work for the Colorado Avalanche and has a Stanley Cup ring. Like that has, it's one thing to just be just some humble blog, but a lot of these spots now, they've turned into breeding grounds for media and NHL teams to be a part of, to take from. And I consider myself to be among the lucky alumni of Habs Eyes on the Prize. And it wouldn't have happened if I had my time with the Syracuse Crunch. And at that time, while I was there, they were pushing to get credentials for AHL games. So when the St. John's Ice Caps eventually moved to Laval, which is north of Montreal, I got to cover games right on that. And, it's right there near the Canadiens. So you're seeing some of those guys in the AHL eventually get called up, and you're trying to build relationships. And eventually after that, some other freelance gigs start popping up as well. The Montreal Gazette, for one, started writing for the Canadian Press Newswire as well, which allowed me to go to Canadiens games as well and cover other Montreal sports. And then it's just kind of funny with the Athletic. I was it's really funny how that kind of materialized with the Athletic, because I don't know, it's like Arpin Basu, who covers the Canadiens in Montreal. We definitely knew of each other for quite some time. I just never expected that they would take enough of an interest in my work that they would want me to get involved in the fold. And in January 2021, they asked me to translate articles from French to English. And I did that for 2 months. And then one of their high ranking editors reached out to me and they said, "Hey, do you want to join as an associate editor?" And I got in that way, and they realized I could write, and they thought, okay, well, we'll let Julian do some kind of column during the first round of the playoffs, because the Canadians are going to get in and they're going to lose to the Leafs in the first round. So it's not like they're going to let him write for long. And then they went on a run. And then a lot of people, I think, started taking notice of my work from then, and got a lot of opportunities that came from that summer. And I really think if that run doesn't happen, I don't think I get the opportunity to go to Calgary. And yeah, it's been a long journey. There's so many other details that I didn't even mention, and if I start doing that, that's a whole 2-hour mini movie.
We could do like a 2-hour podcast just on just this alone, but I understand.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I'm not going to bore you with every single detail, but definitely, I'm really happy with how far I look back at how far I've come from, and I'm really happy and proud of what I've been able to do, and I hope I'm able to continue in that space, and not just write, just podcast and do on camera stuff, and just continue to thrive in the digital media space when it comes to covering hockey.
Like, no, I'm proud of you, Julian and Erica. Like,
Thank
it's
you.
like both of your backgrounds couldn't be more like different but similar at the same time. And like I understand that completely. And what's interesting in my case,
What's your background?
What's that?
How'd you get into it?
Yeah, right.
How did I get to what?
Yeah, you should tell your story.
Like,
you should. I don't know how often you've told your story on your podcast. I was just curious what yours was.
No. Like, thank you for asking and being curious. And so, where do I begin? Like, it's been a very wild journey to in terms of just like getting the opportunity with the hockey news. And when they first came to me, I was truly shocked, because any hockey fan knew the hockey news. This has been around for 75 plus years. Like, this is something that I've had people literally come like tell me like, "Yo, shoot, my grandfather used to get the hockey news, like the print edition, and like read it to me every Sunday or something like that." And I'm just like, so like, I hope you understand like how big of a deal this is. I'm like, I don't think I really understand. And part of it was me being humble. Part of it was like, wow, okay. But as far as how did I get to this point? It's been a journey. It's been a journey and then some. So I started hosting my own radio show like 4 years ago, July 6, 2019. I started hosting a Super Radio show on 91.5 WMFO in the Boston metro area. And through that, it led me down this path during the pandemic, where I started doing like podcasts and stuff like that, like interviewing most notable names in sports media, and as well as even in hockey. I interviewed, true story, you can actually check it out if you're interested, my interview that I did in the spring of 2020 with Hockey Hall of Famer Grant Fuhr, which was one of the great thrills of my lifetime. And I mean that sincerely. I mean, you're talking about one of the greatest goalies I ever lived, like the first Black hockey player dug into the Hockey Hall of Fame. It was just unreal, like surreal in more ways than one. So from there, I hadn't really been doing much writing, I would say, like in recent years. But in the spring of 2021, I started doing like video on the Bruins and stuff like that. And it was just very innocent. I was just like, I'm going to the first game with full capacity since the COVID-19 restrictions were lifted in the city of Boston as well as Massachusetts. And I said, I'm just going to make a video, get people pumped up. I was so excited and whatnot. That video went viral. And that, gave me an idea. I said, you know what? Maybe I should do this more often. So I started doing it more and more and more. What I also realized was that people were actually starting to pay attention, like, who is this guy? And I later found out from one of the program directors, actually the program director, Rick Razik of 98.5 The Sports Hub locally in Boston. He went up to some of the media personalities at that sports radio station and was like, have you seen this guy? And some of them were like, yeah, like we've seen him on social media in terms of that. So to fast forward, there's a lot more like details to it, and because time doesn't permit me to do so, I won't be able to share it now. But I reached out to someone and I said, "Look, I'm not sure if anybody's covering the Bruins right now, but I wouldn't mind like throwing my hat and see what's what." There was no listing, there was no job listing, there was nothing, like just nothing whatsoever. So I got an email. Like this was like sometime in early May, I believe. I think it was early May. I got an email from the chief editor of the Hockey News to say, "Hey, so I was given a recommendation from Ryan Kennedy, who's the associate or assistant chief and editor, about covering the Bruins for the Hockey News." And I was like, "You got my ears, but how did he recommend it? Oh no, we noticed your content on the Bruins, and we think that you're just terrific at what you do, and we just wanted to see if you'd be interested in covering the team, like and it's not just only like written, no, but as well as digital video. Like your thing is video. People, for reasons that I personally can't explain, but reasons that I can see, they pay attention to you when you create videos on Twitter on the Bruins." Mm-hmm. And that's how you've made your name. So we want to offer you an opportunity to cover the team and be the site editor. And I was just like shocked. That's how I ended up getting the opportunity with the Hockey News. It was literally out of nowhere. There wasn't a job posting or anything like that. And I tell people this: if nothing else, if you are a person that likes creating content on social media, do it. You have a smartphone. You don't have to have an iPhone. If you have a smartphone in 2023, use it to your advantage. You don't know who's watching. You don't know how many people are watching. I can sit here and brag about, oh, like I have tens of thousands of views, but I don't care about that. What I actually care about is attracting the right eyes. And I'm sure both of you can attest to that. Attract the right eyes and opportunity to start to open up. So like that's what I would tell people.
That's dope.
That's really dope. That's really cool. I didn't mean to cut you off, Erica. I thought you were going to add something else.
Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, you have it right by saying attracting the right eyeballs. Like one of the podcasts I have is Zone Time with Yahoo Sports, and
drop it.
I know that show. For those who are not familiar with it, this is it's a weekly show that I do with some friends of mine on hockey Twitter, like Samantha Chang from the Broadcast, or Omar from normally puts up Leafs gifs, Avery Lewis McDougall, who also contributes to the Hockey News out in Edmonton. Arun Srinivasan, who also works with Yahoo Sports as well. And it's just this diverse show where you're getting all these perspectives from persons of color, essentially, where we just talk about hockey and talk shit about the culture and all that. And, I know that show is not as popular as like the Chris Johnston Show, which is another show I host, or the Athletic Hockey Show, which I do every Monday with Ian Mendez. But when you run into Greg Wyshynski at an NHL draft and he says, "Oh, I've heard of Zone Time," and he knows what that is, like I could give a damn if like people are gonna say like, "Oh, no one watches Zone Time." Like the right people are watching your content and are taking notice of what you're doing. So I think you made a really good point bringing that up.
Absolutely. And Erica, I want to give you an opportunity to speak before I move on.
No, I think y'all both nailed it. I again didn't really, my aspiration was never to work for the NHL or cover the NHL, but through my passion for hockey on the women's side, it's opened up avenues in hockey in general, to the point where the New Jersey Devils tapped me, a couple of years ago now, to be the analyst voice for their International Women's Day game. It was actually the Devils playing the Colorado Avalanche the year that they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. And cool. I got to call an NHL game on the radio. That's not something I can honestly say I ever grew up aspiring to do, but my passion for people who look more like us, and for people who sometimes like I would say like a highlight of my career as a broadcaster has been that I got to call in about 4 or 5 days. I called almost maybe more than 30 hockey games through the Amerigo Latam Cup that the Florida Panthers and the NHLPA sponsor. And that was so exciting and thrilling. And so people who also sound like me. I'm Black, but I'm also Latina. And so having people say my name the proper way, or hearing Celia Cruz at a hockey rink, like those are the things that really ignite my passions. I've learned to love hockey, but I have passions for all of these other things, including my culture. And I'm just so honored that I get to share some of that in the hockey space.
And it really is, it's everything. Representation in the sport is absolutely is everything. And even as far as like sports media is concerned, I think you're seeing that more and more, where like you're seeing people from different ethnic backgrounds and people of color most notably, like finally get their opportunity to show what they can do, and as well as like the talent that they possess as well. And I just want to wrap up the recording by saying thank you immensely to you, Julian McKenzie of The Athletic, and as well as Erica Ayala of CBS Sports Now, who she just joined the network. Congratulations to her once again, and as well as the terrific broadcaster who's called games for PHF as well, and just a phenomenal conversation. So thank you guys for everything for this episode.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
My
we
pleasure.
made it. We made it, fam.
Yes.
This is really cool.